Duale, mimi hawezi kutisha. Duale, mimi hawezi kutisha. Me, I fear no one.
Let's take the next
This
step.
nonsense you're bringing to this country.
Honorable,
Munaibia watu hapa.
that's right.
You should not be listening.
Wewe unaibia watu.
Waziri,
Have a chair.
proceed
You cannot
and
be saying a
read
meeting in
your
Parliament.
answers and
You're
now
harassing
do not
our chairman, you're
interact
harassing
directly with
members.
any other member.
Who are you? You think you can intimidate
Chairman,
us? We don't hear you.
The sound you're hearing isn't from a protest. It's not from a riot in the streets. It's coming from inside Kenya's parliament. We will not allow you. You are stealing from us. The shouts echo like thunder through the marble halls, not from angry citizens, but from the very leaders meant to protect them. What you just heard is not a random argument. It's the sound of a nation's healthcare system collapsing in real time. A government tearing itself apart over money, meant for the sick money, meant for mothers who can't find medicine for children, who need dialysis for families, who believed the promise that healthcare would finally be for everyone. In 2025, Kenya replaced its National Health Insurance Fund with a bold new idea, the Social Health Authority, or SHA, a system that was supposed to bring dignity and affordable care to millions. But today that dream is on life support. Hospitals, our empty cancer wards are closing, and the people who built this system are now at war with each other. Inside Parliament, the Minister of Health and members of Parliament shout accusations of theft, fraud, and blackmail. Outside, patients wait quietly, dying as machines break down and bills go unpaid. And so we must ask, when a nation's hospitals turn into battlefields for power, who heals the people? When leaders scream about accountability, but no one answers, who speaks for the dying? This is not just a story about Kenya. It's a story about how corruption can infect the very systems built to save lives. A story every nation, including the United States, should pay attention to. Stay with us. Because before this story ends, you'll understand why what's happening in Nairobi might determine the future of healthcare justice across Africa, and why it might already be too late to look away. It began as a quiet morning in Nairobi, the kind of day when Parliament is supposed to function like a heartbeat, steady, predictable, and calm. The National Assembly's Health Committee had gathered for what should have been a routine session. On paper, the agenda was simple review, a report on Kenya's new Social Health Authority, SHA, the National Health Insurance System, created to replace the old NHIF. After touring 10 hospitals across the country, the committee's findings were alarming. Machines were broken, bills unpaid, medical staff demoralized. Some hospitals had no drugs for cancer patients. Others were shutting down entire wards. SHA, the program meant to save lives, was instead strangling the health system with unpaid debts. So when the Health Cabinet Secretary Aden Duale walked into that chamber, there was already tension in the air. He sat down before the panel of MPs, men and women who had seen the despair firsthand and prepared to answer their questions. But the moment the cameras started rolling, the hearing took a dark turn. Duale began not with humility, but with accusation. He pointed at several members and claimed they had conflicts of interest, secretly owning hospitals that were under review by SHA. "I will not be intimidated by anyone," he declared, invoking Article 153 of the Constitution. "I came here to answer questions, not to be blackmailed." The room froze. Then came the response, fiery, personal, unstoppable. Member of Parliament Anthony Kibagendi stood up, his voice trembling with rage. "We will not allow you to intimidate this committee. You are not the president here." That was the spark. Voices rose. Fists hit the desks. Duale shot back, "I will not allow you to extort and blackmail the minister." The word extort was like a match dropped into gasoline. Kibagendi erupted. "Who is extorting you? You are the one stealing from SHA. You and your friends are the thieves." He turned toward the chair, Dr. James Nicol, and shouted, "And you, doctor, you are living by borrowed values. Why are you intimidated by this man?" The hearing fell apart. Microphones crackled, cameras shook, and the scene that was supposed to restore faith in the health system became a national embarrassment. Duale accused Kibagendi of owning a private hospital. Kibagendi denied it, demanding evidence. "Charge me. Show the papers. You're the thief, not me." In that moment, every illusion of order vanished. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Kibagendi stormed out. Duale shouted over the noise, and the chair called for calm, but it was too late. What happened next was even worse. Instead of addressing the accusations, both sides went silent. No records were released, no contracts published, No one explained why hospitals were being paid for services they never offered, or how non-existent facilities had received millions. And yet somewhere behind that shouting match lies the real story. SHA, the new health authority, had signed an IT system contract that placed its data servers outside Kenya's jurisdiction. Meaning, if anything went wrong, the Kenyan government couldn't even sue the supplier in a local court. It was a scandal hidden in plain sight. But in that parliamentary hall, no one was talking about data security or public oversight. They were too busy trading insults. The people's health was no longer the subject, it was collateral damage. For ordinary Kenyans, the message was clear. The men entrusted to heal the system were now part of its sickness. By the time the session ended, it wasn't just a political embarrassment. It was a national symbol, a parliament screaming while hospitals quietly ran out of oxygen. When the shouting stopped, the silence that followed was even louder. By the next morning, clips of the confrontation had already gone viral across Kenya. Millions watched as their elected officials screamed pointed fingers and stormed out of parliament. To many, it wasn't politics anymore, it was a public autopsy of a dying health system. Across social media, one question echoed through every timeline. If they can't even talk without fighting, how will they ever heal our hospitals? On X, formerly Twitter member of Parliament, Anthony Kibagendi doubled down. Each time I ask CS Duale hard questions about SHA, he accuses me of owning hospitals. If that's true, name them and close them. It was a direct challenge, one that the minister never answered. Instead, Aden Duale stayed silent, letting the rumors swirl. To the public, that silence sounded like guilt. Within hours, the hashtags Yaisha Heist and Hospitals Without Medicine began trending. Doctors, nurses, and activists joined the storm. One post read, "They shout in Parliament while our patients die in corridors. We have no drugs, no pay, and no hope." Faith-based hospitals, once the backbone of rural healthcare, reported that they had gone months without SHA reimbursements. Cancer treatment centers began turning away patients, and at night, families gathered outside dark hospital gates, holding prescriptions they could no longer afford to fill. The government called it a misunderstanding, but to the people it felt like betrayal. Every news channel replayed the scene, Duale's anger, Kibagendi's defiance, the pounding of fists on wood. For many Kenyans, that moment captured something far deeper, a moral breakdown. This wasn't just a spat between politicians. It was the sound of an entire nation asking for answers and getting chaos instead. Even the health workers' union issued a statement. When ministers call MPs extortionists and MPs call ministers thieves, who is left to speak for the patient, whistleblowers within the ministry quietly reached out to journalists claiming the corruption went far beyond what Parliament had discussed. Some alleged that SHA had paid millions to clinics that did not exist on paper, ghost facilities created to siphon funds. Others spoke of inflated invoices and falsified claims approved through a loophole in the IT system. When reporters tried to access the payment lists, they hit a wall. The ministry refused to release them, citing confidentiality. Even the Auditor General's office said it had been denied access to certain SHA records. It became clear that transparency itself had been outlawed. As the outrage grew, the Speaker of Parliament promised a follow-up hearing, but by then public faith was already broken. Radio callers described it as a circus, a distraction, a show to fool the poor. One caller from Kisumu said, "They argue about hospitals they will never visit. When they get sick, they fly to Dubai." The comment hit hard because it was true. While ordinary Kenyans lined up outside clinics with expired medicine, their leaders sought treatment abroad. Civil society groups demanded an independent investigation. They wanted a full list of SHA payments, the hospital names, the owners, the amounts, but the government remained unmoved. Weeks passed and no answers came. The crisis reached its emotional peak when a video surfaced online, a nurse crying as she held an empty tray in the oncology ward. "We have nothing left to give them," she whispered, "not even painkillers." That clip, more than any speech, defined the scandal. It wasn't the sound of politicians yelling, it was the quiet collapse of compassion. For Kenya, the fight between Duale and Kibagendi was never really about politics. It was about a nation's soul. And in that soul, the wound called SHA kept bleeding, unseen, unanswered, and unhealed. The weeks that followed the shouting match felt like the aftermath of an earthquake. Every system still standing seemed cracked, uncertain, and ready to crumble. In towns across Kenya, the consequences of the SHA crisis became painfully visible. Hospitals that once buzzed with the sound of life now echoed with silence. Patients lay on iron beds waiting for treatments that would never come. In rural clinics, nurses used flashlights during surgeries because electricity bills hadn't been paid. Mothers sold their goats and chickens to buy medicine that used to be covered by insurance. In Nairobi, faith-based hospitals, which serve nearly one-third of Kenya's poor, announced closures. Cancer patients were told to come back next week. Dialysis units stopped functioning. And everywhere people whispered the same phrase, SHA has killed more than it has healed. Civil groups began organizing protests under the banner, "Where is our money?" But instead of addressing their demands, the government deployed police patrols around the Ministry of Health. The image of armed officers guarding a ministry meant to save lives captured the moral contradiction at the heart of the crisis. For many Kenyans, it was no longer about one minister or one MP. It was about a system that had lost its conscience. Radio stations became confessionals where citizens called in to share stories of loss: a father who died waiting for oxygen, a child who couldn't get insulin, a woman who watched her husband fade away because the machine was under maintenance. Politically, the scandal split the ruling coalition. Some lawmakers demanded the resignation of Aden, Duale, calling him unfit to lead a ministry built on trust. Others claimed that the whole investigation was a political weapon designed to weaken the president's allies. The president himself remained silent, hoping the storm would pass. But it didn't. Opposition leaders seized the moment, branding SHA as the heist of the decade. One speech went viral: "If our hospitals are bleeding, it's because our leaders have turned them into ATMs for corruption." That line became a rallying cry, a truth too powerful to be ignored. Meanwhile, independent auditors revealed that the SHA's payment system had authorized transactions to non-existent facilities, some registered to P.O. boxes or private apartments. The trail of money vanished offshore, hidden behind companies no one could trace. Every revelation fueled more anger, but also more fear. Civil servants who tried to speak up were transferred overnight or silenced. The social fabric of Kenya began to tear. Faith in Parliament, already fragile, hit a historic low. For the average Kenyan, oversight became just another word for political theater. And yet something unexpected began to grow beneath the frustration: awareness. Ordinary citizens started demanding transparency in ways they never had before. Young activists created online databases to crowdsource reports of unpaid hospitals. Journalists formed cross-platform alliances to track the missing funds. It was as if, out of the wreckage of SHA, a new civic spirit was being born, fragile but alive. Still, the damage was immense. Kenya's dream of universal healthcare now lay in tatters, and the price wasn't measured in dollars or shillings, but in human lives lost to indifference. The scandal had not just exposed corruption, it had revealed a deeper truth: that a nation can build hospitals, buy machines, and pass laws, but without integrity, those walls become tombs. From Washington to Brussels, the story barely made the evening news. Another African scandal, another governance issue, another minister accused of corruption, the kind of story that gets a paragraph in Western media before the world moves on. But beneath that quiet neglect lies a bigger question: who keeps Africa sick and who profits when it stays that way? For decades, Kenya has been one of the largest recipients of U.S. and European health funding. Billions have flowed into programs branded as humanitarian global health initiatives, USAID, the World Bank, the IMF's healthcare reforms. Yet somehow the result looks the same: underpaid doctors, broken machines, and missing medicine. The tragedy of SHA isn't just local mismanagement. It's the reflection of a global pattern where Western-backed reforms often create systems too complex, too expensive, and too vulnerable to corruption. In the United States, many older Americans watching this story will recognize something familiar: the bureaucracy, the red tape, the endless arguments about who pays for care and who deserves it. Because whether in Nairobi or New York, healthcare collapses when profit replaces compassion. But what makes Kenya's case uniquely tragic is the illusion of aid. Western governments keep sending money not to local hospitals directly, but through layers of consultants, NGOs, and private contractors. Every layer takes a cut. By the time the funds reach a village clinic, there's barely enough left to buy gloves. Meanwhile, ministers like Aden, Duale stand in front of cameras saying, "We are reforming," while real reformers, doctors, nurses, journalists, are threatened or silenced. It's a cycle the West quietly tolerates because it maintains influence, dependency disguised as partnership. Across Africa, however, that narrative is beginning to crack. Nations like Burkina Faso, under President Ibrahim Traoré, are openly rejecting this model. They are funding hospitals from domestic revenue training doctors locally and demanding that every aid dollar be publicly audited. When Traore speaks about sovereignty, he doesn't mean isolation, he means independence with integrity. In Ouagadougou, a new national hospital was recently inaugurated without Western loans. In Nairobi, hospitals are closing over unpaid foreign-funded programs. The contrast is painful and prophetic. Even Western analysts are starting to admit that Africa's real revolution may not come from war or protest, but from accountability. A nurse in Burkina Faso once said, "We don't want charity. We want respect and the tools to heal ourselves." That sentence captures the heart of this story. Kenya's crisis is not only about stolen money, it's about a world order that still treats African suffering as a business opportunity. So, as Americans watching from afar, perhaps the question isn't, what's wrong with Africa? It's what's wrong with us that we keep funding the same broken systems and calling it help. When you strip away the politics, the shouting, and the hashtags, what remains is something hauntingly simple. A question: can a nation that cannot care for its sick still call itself free? The scandal inside Kenya's parliament was never just about health insurance. It was about moral collapse, about a government that forgot its duty and a people who were told to stop asking questions. SHA, once announced as a new dawn for universal care, has become a symbol of everything that goes wrong when power feeds on the pain of the poor. And yet, even in this darkness, there is a flicker of light. Ordinary citizens, doctors, mothers, students are beginning to demand accountability. They are saying, "We are not your children. We are your employers." That spirit, that defiance, is the first step toward healing. But the truth is harsh. Kenya is not alone. Across the continent, from Nigeria to Ghana, from South Africa to Ethiopia, the same disease spreads corruption disguised as reform. Leaders sign contracts they never read. Ministers defend systems they don't understand. And the West keeps applauding progress while the patients die. In Burkina Faso, however, a different story is unfolding. President Ibrahim Traoré has made healthcare not a privilege, but a right, rebuilding hospitals with national funds and publishing every expense for citizens to see. It's not perfect, but it's honest. It's leadership by example, not by slogan. That contrast should force all of us to look inward. Because if Africa's future depends on who it decides to follow, then perhaps the real question is, do we continue trusting those who profit from our sickness, or do we stand with those who choose to heal? For the people of Kenya, this is not just a debate, it's a matter of survival. For the rest of the world, it's a mirror, a reflection of what happens when truth becomes optional and empathy becomes expensive. So tonight, wherever you are, in Nairobi, in New York, or in Ouagadougou, remember this: health is not charity, it's justice, and silence is never neutral. Please share this video if you believe that the truth deserves a heartbeat louder than corruption. And subscribe if you believe, like we do, that Africa's healing begins with accountability, not apology.